Hello and thank you for joining us. I am Precious Amayo. We start here in Africa where a private jet carrying Libya's military chief, General Muhammed Al-Haddad, and 4 others and staff crashed on Tuesday after takeoff from Turkey's capital Ankara, killing everyone on board. The crash, which also killed 4 senior Libyan military officials and 3 crew members, has sent shockwaves across Libya, where General Al-Haddad was seen as a unifying figure amid deep political divisions. Officials say the cause of the crash was a technical malfunction on the plane. Libyan Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dbeiba has described the tragic incident as, quote, a great loss for Libya. According to Turkish officials, the Libyan delegation was in Ankara for high-level defense talks aimed at boosting military cooperation between the 2 countries. General Al-Haddad was a top military commander in western Libya and played a crucial role in the ongoing UN-brokered efforts to unify Libya's military, which has split much like Libya's institutions. The Libyan government has announced 3 days of national mourning. For more on this development, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies, David Awara, will join me now to discuss the latest development in Libya. Good to have you join us, Prof.
Thank you for inviting me.
And Prof, like we already mentioned in that introduction script, General Al-Haddad works within the United Nations recognized government, and that's the government of national unity in Tripoli. They were working to bring together competing factions. I mean, how much of a blow is this to Prime Minister Dbeiba?
It is a huge, huge blow. Libya has very few military individuals, political leaders who are interested in pursuing unity between the factions that have existed since 2014. And Muhammed Al-Haddad happened to be one of those leading characters in the move to unify the military, and with the expectation that the rest of the divide too will be unified. Unfortunately, he died in this tragic crash on Tuesday night. So it's a huge, huge blow.
And Prof, Libya already has a Sudan-like situation where you have renegade generals, controlling different parts or territories of the country. But are you concerned now that with his death, there might be, even within his own faction, a split, and that this could split them even further?
Exactly so. There will be individuals who will want to compete, to take over his position. That is one. There will also be individuals who will not be sure of the cause of death, even though it is clear now that it was technical malfunction for the aircraft. There are some who have conspiracy theory regarding the death of Al-Haddad. This will further exacerbate tension in Libya, which is why I said earlier that the death of Al-Haddad is a huge blow. One, it will deprive Libya of the opportunity to have Al-Haddad's contribution to the unity of the country. And 2, it will create the condition for elements that are left, divisive elements, to cash in on what has happened to further cause division in Libya. So it is a tragedy of monumental proportion.
And even before we get to just his life, I want to stay on what you just said, because it's easy to suspect sabotage if you are already in a situation or in a country like Libya where there's a split across different lines. How quick should this investigation go? We understand that an investigation has been opened. How quick should it go in a way that it can quell some of these suspicions and conspiracy theories?
Yes, it should be very, very swift. Very, very swift, especially since it was discovered that there was a fireball before the aircraft. In that dark condition, there was a fireball, which means there was some explosion. That leaves room for conspiracy theories to think that maybe something was planted on the aircraft to cause the crash. So the investigation should be very, very swift, and it should be open as well. And whatever the findings are should be made open and revealed as quickly as possible to douse tension, such that Libya's already fractured political and military systems will not be further worsened by the death of Al-Haddad.
While he was largely seen as a unifying figure, Prof, if we just go back, to the time of Gaddafi, General Al-Haddad is described as one of the first military officials who joined the rebel forces in the revolution that toppled Gaddafi. When you, look at that man and this particular man, who is now seen as a unifying figure, what does that say holistically about him?
Well, that Haddad was an asset to Libya, really. Under Gaddafi, Libya experienced tremendous economic and social progress. But Gaddafi had a major weakness. He couldn't unify the country. He was very divisive and he was authoritarian. All of those things combined to bring, his downfall. On the other hand, Muhammad Al-Haddad, as you can see from his activities since 2014, has worked hard to bring the various factions together to have a united country. So if I'm to rank, I will rank Al-Haddad far higher than Gaddafi, despite the progress that Libya made under him. If you're a leader of a state, contributing to social progress, political progress, economic progress, but you are not able to, you are divisive in your approach. You are not, your government is not inclusive, especially in a multi-ethnic country. Everything you have done may just, pale into insignificance. But so given that, I will rate Al-Haddad far, far higher than Gaddafi in terms of contribution to Libya's development, which is why his death, as I said before, is a tragedy, a huge, huge tragedy.
And is it safe to say that he was actually the leader of the GNU, the Government of National Unity, even though you have Prime Minister Debaiba, but that because he really is the face of the government there, and he was the one working with the United Nations, that he was the one actually leading that faction in Tripoli?
I would rather regard him as a stabilizer. He wasn't the leader, wasn't the prime minister, but he was a very respected figure, and his contributions were well appreciated. So he was a stabilizer in the government, and by extension, a stabilizer in Libya as a whole. Perhaps if he hadn't died and his activities continued, he might have been in a short time be able to bring all the centrifugal forces and vociferous tendencies in Libya together, so that we can have a stable country. Libya is hugely rich, but all of these conflicts, crises, have made it impossible for Libyans to enjoy the wealth of the country. So it's unfortunate that what has happened has happened.
And one of the things, you also know this very well, that there are powerful armed groups and militias controlling different parts of, land and territories in Libya, and they hold a huge influence on the government. He's said to be one of the few who, if not the only one, who was able to hold them off and not being swayed by some of their demands. What happens now with those rebel groups now that he's gone?
It will be a lot easier for them to influence the government, and negatively too. Except sometimes when things like this happen, a new individual we never knew before might just emerge to fill the vacuum, very, very neatly. We hope Libya finds such. But if Libya does not, all of these, criminal mafia gangs and insurgent warlords will have a field day in Libya, and that will be a tragedy for the country.
And what does this also mean for the United Nations? The United Nations has been very, very active in terms of trying to stabilize Libya, even though we've not seen much of the results, of their efforts, and again, because of the situation on the ground. But what does this mean for those efforts and for the United Nations?
It complicates the efforts of the United Nations. It makes the task very daunting. And, the results that were already not, extensive will be further reduced. The capacity to achieve the objective set will also be drastically reduced. So for the United Nations, it will be a huge issue. The United Nations relies on people like Al-Haddad to be able to, get the objectives fulfilled. They can't just move into a country and begin to do things without the cooperation and support of influential people within the political system, legislative system of that country, which is why some people describe by the UN as the word in microcosm. What the individuals within the system do is actually what the UN is. And so it will complicate, the UN's activities and reduce the capacity to achieve the results and the objective set, which has been, at least, yielding positive results, even though not so vast in the past, I think since 2020.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, during the break, I mean, Libya has been in turmoil since 2011, arising from the Arab Springs. It has had two civil wars. And I'm just wondering, again, in my head, maybe Libya, again, can we say Libya is at crossroads once again, especially with the death of Al-Haddad, just looking at the broader implication?
Certainly. We just hope that things don't get so worse before they begin to get better in Libya. Like I said before, Al-Haddad's death, of course, certainly has created a huge vacuum in efforts to reconcile, the various forces in Libya, military, political, and the rest. But what we can only hope for is that, one, we do not have conspiracy theorists that would, claim that Haddad was maybe killed or something, and then that leads to a full-blown civil war. Which we also pray that the investigation, the reports are released as quickly as possible so that we can see what exactly has gone on. And three, we should also hope that someone like Haddad will arise, would emerge to fill the vacuum and continue from where he stopped. If all of this happen, yes, Haddad's death has created a vacuum and created problems for reconciliation and stability in Libya. It won't be so extreme if all of these three things I just talked about happen, and that is what we hope for, so that stability can be restored to Libya, and people can then go about their economic activities and then improve the quality of life of the people.
Why has it been so difficult? I mean, it's 14 years now. Why has it been so difficult to break the political gridlock in Libya?
Yeah, the characters mainly, and the depth of division that existed before Gaddafi's death in 2011. He had been fighting for many, many years, up to a decade. It is just that from 2009, the struggle, escalated and, became more attracted global attention. So those two things: one, the character of those, who emerged in the post-Gaddafi era in 2011, and then two, the depth of division that existed in the country before Gaddafi's death. In 2014, things just turned topsy-turvy. Things just went overboard, and unfortunately, 11 years after that, they haven't been able to find a common ground to be able to establish stability in the country. So to address the problem, the individuals have to see the broader picture, more concerned with the common good instead of personal interest. And then two, the people have to just see themselves as compatriots, belonging to the same country, and that divisions don't have to be that intense so as to make the country ungovernable. And of course, everybody is the worse for it when that happens. If this mindset is developed in Libya, hopefully it won't be too long from now before stability is restored in the country.
And Prof, the conflict in Libya has had really grave consequences for the continent, especially in terms of security implications. Is that going to worsen now? Should African countries begin to tighten security, especially with the death of Al-Haddad?
From what we can see, the answer will be yes. We know that even in Nigeria here, many of the small arms and light weapons that bandits, terrorists have used, have been flowing from Libya. And the same thing for Sudan and some other countries, across the entire Sahel, actually. And it has been so bad, even with all the efforts of Al-Haddad and the United Nations and others to try to stabilize the country. Now, with Al-Haddad's exit, the projection can only be that things will be worse. So you are right. African countries, including Nigeria, we need to begin to tighten, to look at the borders more closely so as to reduce to the barest minimum the flow of small arms and light weapons into the country. And of course, at the level of the AU, something beyond rhetoric should take place so that all of these conflicts, not just in Libya, in Sudan is the same thing, like you said, Sudan-like condition in Libya, yes. And of course, several other African countries where we have had violence going on, instability being so intense, can be resolved for the continent to really grow and develop.
A key part of Al-Haddad's drive was to transition Libya to civilian rule. What would likely happen now to broader attempts to stabilize Libya and a transition to democracy, back to democracy and civilian rule?
Unfortunately, again, that will be complicated. From what we know of military leaders, when they're able to seize power at the center or they control different parts, as we now have in Libya, two capitals essentially and the rest of them, they don't want to leave power. They want to stay, they want to perpetuate themselves in power for as long as possible. And so with a figure like Al-Haddad out of the picture, the chances are that many of the military leaders that are left behind will be interested in perpetuating themselves in power. And so the program to transition to civilian government will suffer a huge setback with Al-Haddad's exit.
And what is the possibility, with or without Al-Haddad, just generally looking at the situation in Libya, what is the possibility of even having a power sharing agreement?
Well, they tried that, a few years ago, and it seemed to have worked, and then it didn't now work again. That is the realm of conjecture. It goes to the point I made earlier regarding what I would call the idiosyncratic variable. The characters who are, holding forth, controlling different parts of the country, what they choose to do, what they choose to do, their outlook regarding where Libya should be. If they suddenly think that they should focus on the common good and the stability of Libya, it won't be long for them to resolve these contradictions. But if they continue to focus on personal interests and, they are egoistic in their approach, then the Libyan crisis will remain for quite some time.
Prof, interesting developments in not just in Libya, but on the African continent. It looks like, Africa is dealing with other election, post-election crisis or conflicts between factions in several countries, as well as insecurity as well. We'll continue to follow these developments. We'd like to bring you in to help us analyze them as well. Always a pleasure to have you on. Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies, David Awarawa.
Thank you for having me.